You mentioned hospice workers, and just from my own experience, these people, they have a tremendous understanding of what's going on, what the families are experiencing. Do you suppose that the people who are drawn toward the hospice work specifically, which can't be an easy thing to do, are the kind of people who would naturally sense what's going on?
That's a great question. Well, so I'll answer this one by giving you something to support what the question is asking. And that is the largest inquiries, the largest amount of inquiries we get for our shared crossing training programs is from hospice volunteer organizations. These are people who choose to be at the bedside of somebody dying. They see some meaning, richness, some gifts to being with the dying. And I would say that I think you're right, that they have a sensibility that may be more intuitive, more spiritually open, if you will. And so being in these environments with the dying, they receive, they participate in. I'm presenting, today on the shared death experience, but there's a lot of phenomena there. One of the great researchers, really my colleagues in Great Britain is Dr. Peter Fenwick, and he talks about death as a process. It's not the medical, heart stops, brain waves stop, and you're dead. He talks about death as taking place over a period of time, and the dying titrating between what lies beyond this, quote unquote afterlife, and then coming back here. And this can go on for a number of hours, if not days. So if you're attuned to that as a hospice worker or, in hospice or end-of-life care, I know I did that work. I would sense and feel different energies, different experiences in the room. And they're spectacular. They're beyond explanation. I mean, one thing we always talk about in hospice is it feels like there's presences in the room. It feels like the room is full. The air is thick. And then when the person dies, it's like that room empties out and it even gets a little cooler. And you're like, what was all that? And you use our simple kind of human minds here and say, well, maybe there were beings coming down to greet and to help. And that's, but I didn't mention this feature earlier, but we have a feature in about 15% of our cases where the SD experiencer sees a welcoming party. Hears the voices of deceased relatives that he or she may not have seen for decades, but they're there to welcome the loved one home. So there's a lot going on in this space. And your question is really sage, because I think people who feel drawn to that are drawn to that because there's something there. It's not some weirdness. It's really a rich transition field. It's a great bardo, as the Tibetans would say. So
you've already mentioned what people can do to increase their likelihood, meditation, being in nature, etc. But I've heard that you've actually developed some methods to enable SDEs. How did you come up with those?
So that's a good question. When I heard Raymond Moody speak, and this was 2011, and he talked about the SDE, like I said, my body just lit up and said, oh my gosh, I've never heard anybody talk about this. And he read case after case, and I said, oh yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about. So I went up to talk to him about it, and I said to him, I said, I this just kind of came out of me as I listened to myself say it now. It sounds rather brazen. So I think I know how to help people if they want to have one of these. And he said, well, wonderful. Raymond was very affirming. I mean, he knew that I'd had them. And the way I put it in my mind then was, there's a landscape between this life and what lies beyond. And having had the shared near-death experiences and now multiple shared death experiences, there are signposts, and there are metaphorical, energetic signposts. And so I feel like there's preparation for the journey of dying. And that begins with really knowledge about end-of-life experiences generally, and share death experience specifically, so that if you are at a bedside and all of a sudden you feel the change in the dimensions of the room, or you get a little dizzy, if you see the light change, if you feel thickness, okay, now you know you're beginning something. And if you have the ability to, stay focused and not get freaked out or just distract yourself, if you can realize this is the time and you can stay with it, then we have a series of protocols, which are essentially, we guide people. When we do the trainings, we often work with, not exclusively, but often with the person dying and a loved one, and we'll take them through this landscape. We'll show them all these phenomena, and we do it in a guided visualization way. So it's a bit of a simulation, and then they go home and practice. And this is the way you kind of build your receptivity and openness to these experiences. And I will say there's a third component to our trainings that we learned is really helpful, and that is people do well at end of life who have addressed all their unfinished business. Those who have righted their relationships, those who have acknowledged to their loved ones that they're dying, gone through the processes of reviewing their regrets, seeking forgiveness, asking forgiveness, forgiving others, and engaging in these what we kind of psychological, emotional, and spiritual cleansing processes. What they really are is really leaving everything you accumulated here karmically, if you will, right here. Work out your relationships and get to a place of gratitude and love for the life you've had. And we take people through these processes, a number of spiritual practices, and that take you right up to a place where you can look at every loved one and say to him or her, I've been working on this for a long time. At some point, either you're going to die from me or I'm going to die from you. And I want to say to you right now, thank you for having shared my life with you. I love you, and I appreciate every time we've had together. We may have struggled a lot, but at this point, all that remains is love. So at some point, you're going to say goodbye to me, or I'm going to say goodbye to you. But I welcome that. So coming to that level of right relationship and peace and love, that means you are ready for a clean exit. No hooks, no psychic hooks, nothing to keep you here. It's a very natural, healthy end of life. And that's what we train people in. And, what I'm sharing is not anything that the great spiritual traditions, the wisdom traditions have not taught. Particularly in the East, they have a great deal of knowledge about how to prepare for, a graceful death, if you will. Mm-hmm. And we have it in the West too. In the Ars Moriendi, the art of dying is really, it's a medieval, monastic set of practices to prepare for a graceful death. And these were the monasteries in Central Europe in particular had these practices for about 5 centuries. So the wisdom is there. We're just re-tapping into pieces of it.
Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions, trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabonis.com.